always interesting for me on Sunday morning because I have a model of preparing for these moments that I call 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, and on the 7th day you shall rest. So I've been struggling with these texts for 6 days approximately. I usually go home on Sundays and I start wrestling with next week. Quietly, I don't like to disturb Barbara or anything. But on Sunday I really do like to come here with the trust that God's Holy Spirit has a word for you. And that word may be pronounced in the lines that I say, or it may be pronounced between them. The key thing is that you be attentive to what it is that the Spirit might be saying to you, as I try to find some language to reflect my relationship with the text through the week and my relationship in this world that we share. One image has come to my mind, and I've been somewhat reluctant to share it because I might get the facts wrong, and I'm going to say something about my dad, and my mom likes to listen to the services on the web or on the YouTube, which we're posting there now, and I'm a little bit nervous that my dad might hear this and think I've got the facts wrong. But the thing is that this is a story, and it really did happen, and even if the facts aren't quite right, the principle at work is. My dad at one time had bought a small piece of property, and it really was my dad. It's not as if he consulted with mom and the 10 kids and said, what should we do next? He simply said, I bought a farm. And that's how Dad did things. But on that farm, which took a while to get used to because most of my brothers and sisters and I had grown up in the city, I began to discover some very remarkable things about being close to nature. The farm had 40 acres or so, which was what we call fallow land. And those of you who have experience with agriculture will know that fallow land is land that has been left alone. So it has become natural. And it was a beautiful meadow. And some of you might be aware that sundown Manitoba lies sort of just underneath a migratory bird path. So every spring and fall we would have sandhill cranes, we'd have snow geese, we'd have Canada geese, we'd have all the various kinds of ducks. And the cranes used to like to come and just spend a little bit of time relaxing in that meadow. And I used to like to sit and watch them. But the key feature of the meadow was a circle of giant spruce trees. And I am quite clear in my memory that even the smallest I could not get my arms around. And for the prairie, that's a substantial tree, and there's about 6 of them, and they form almost a perfect circle. So for me, as a young poetic mind, I love to go in there and feel that perhaps this was a sacred space for me. And these trees reached way up into the heavens, and they provided a little kind of a chapel. Well, a man knocked on Dad's door one day, and this man had a business, and his business was moving houses around in the province. And you've seen sometimes what it looks like when a truck comes and picks up a house and puts it on a kind of a trailer thing and takes it from one point to another. But what this man said to my dad is, he said, I've noticed you've got some wonderful spruce trees, and he said they would be brilliant if I could cut them down and turn them into beams for using to make my trailer to haul houses around. And this is the part where I can't remember if Dad took $60 from the man or if he took $600. It might even have been $6,000, but I don't think so. What I remembered is that Dad made a decision about something that I felt was sacred, these great trees that had been there perhaps for 100 or more years, and in a moment they were cut down and turned into money. And that made me sad, and it's one of the few things that I can still sort of hold against my dad. But in a way, that desire to turn the natural world into money is not limited to my dad. It's a kind of a thing that has affected all of humanity, and not just in our time, but in all times. Now, thinking about the text, I realized that the one thing both of them had in common was their reference to Exodus. You shall not, for I am the God who brought you out of Egypt, is in the Exodus text. And then the Passover of the Jews was near in the Gospel text. And the Passover of the Jews, most of you will be aware, was a commemoration, a remembrance of the deliverance from bondage in the house of Egypt. And when God took the people out of Egypt, he told them to not forget the experience, to remember it, and to communicate it to all generations. And we may ask, what does that mean for us who are not Jewish people, but who do value what the scriptures offer us in the way of insight and encouragement? Now, I am going to suggest, because I have studied these things for most of my adult life, that the Bible is more than about being saved and getting into heaven. I'm not going to discount that part of it, but when that part of it becomes the only thing that matters for folks, I suspect we are moving into the realm of what this scripture calls idolatry, choosing something and preferring it to the living relationship with God. And that certainly had happened in Egypt, and it was certainly happening in the day of Jesus. So very briefly, Egypt was called the house of bondage, and what it was debt servitude. That over a protracted period of time, perhaps a generation or a generation and a half, persons who lived in the land, who made their daily bread out of working that land, together with their friends and neighbors, these people eventually got to the point where they could no longer afford to make ends meet, and they had to mortgage their lands. And they mortgaged that to the Egyptian government, and in this way the Egyptian government over time got control of all of the land, and the people had none. And in a basic way, if you've seen Ben-Hur, the people are used to build the great cities of the Pharaoh. They are used to manufacture all of the luxury items that are in Pharaoh's palace, all of the treasures that are valued by persons in high places. Just like today, there are signs of success. If you have a great and glorious house, you must be very successful. If you live in a small rental property, you must not be very successful at all. So the measurement of our experience by the indications of what we possess. And Moses responds to God's call, and he leads the people out of Egypt. He leads the people out of an economic system that is exploiting both people and land and making bad use of them. So when we come to Jesus and we come to the Passover time, we know that that population is remembering their deliverance from the house of bondage. And in some ways that can be a symbol of our deliverance from sin into everlasting life. Sin basically being considered as a turning away from the pattern that God has established in the natural world, so that we break with nature and we begin to value what is artificial over and above what is natural. And in this text, which has been the focus of much study, the gospel text, theologians have questioned what it means that Jesus got so aggressive on this day that he would walk into a place of worship, not maybe the sanctuary, but the outer courtyards, and demonstrate his anger by throwing over the tables where commerce was being done. And his complaint is that the house of God, which is to be a spiritual house, has been turned into something else. And I would encourage you to Google sometime, if you have a moment, the name Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a marvelous engineer and an architect, and Jerusalem at the time was glorious in terms of its building projects. It had great temples. People compared it to maybe being even greater than the Temple of Solomon. It had great sports complexes. It had a great seaport, which was a marvel of engineering. But these things, these signs that the people considered to be signs of God's blessing, Jesus said were distractions and distortions of the truth that God makes known. And what I would like to propose is that just like Egypt, just like Rome, every major historical period of civilization reaches a point where it realizes the error of its ways. And at that time, each person is called to make a decision. Right now, that will be coming to your attention more and more as the nation gears up for an election. People will be talking about all kinds of things and trying to get you to support their view on it. And I'm not sure if it's my place as a minister to encourage you in your place as citizens, but I do believe that as a minister I have a responsibility to let you know that God prefers respect for nature to success in the marketplace. That is to say, right now, even more than Rome, even more than Egypt, we are in a time of great peril. And that peril has come about because we have preferred money and the things money can buy to love and what love makes available to us as human beings. There is not a relationship anymore that is not touched by money. There are people everywhere worried about money. There are people doing their best to see if they can't make one more million just before the end of the month or the end of the year. Money has dominated our consciousness. And I would like you to pay close attention when various persons are speaking to you about how you might decide to be supportive, to listen. Listen for the spirit that indicates, are they standing for the good of creation? Are they standing for the health of the rivers and the oceans and the other waters? Are they standing for the health of the air and the forest? Are they promoting these values and encouraging you to promote them and to adopt them? Or is the direction otherwise? I suspect you know as well as I do what the direction is just now. So this decision that you as a person are called to make is exactly the same as the decision people were called to make when Jesus went about saying, "Follow me." To follow Jesus is to choose a way of life which is respectful of the natural order. The way of Jesus respects the pronouncement in Genesis where God looks back on everything that has been created and says, it is all very good. We now have opportunity to do what we are able in our small realm of influence to make a difference. We did not get to where we are in one day. We got here decision by decision over the period of our lifetimes and our parents' lifetimes. Day by day, we have moved closer to this crisis. And in exactly that way, day by day, we can move away from it. But it means becoming somewhat evangelical. And not evangelical in the sense of asking people, are you going to heaven or are you going to hell? But in the sense of, are you working with God to heal the creation so that the people who live in it can be healthy and happy? Or are you with those massive, powerful, corporate interests that only want to use people to make money? It's a real decision. And never ever think that your single personhood is not sufficient. Even if you make the decision to live responsibly, to live with respect in creation, already the tide has started to turn. If the ocean is made up of billions and billions of drops in water, every time one drop's moved this way, the balance shifts. And not only to choose it, but to begin to encourage friends and neighbors and family to choose it as well. And not as an idea to be talked about, but as a practice to be lived. The world that God has made is open to what I call choice and consequence. The present we experience as a people on the planet is the present some people have chosen. The great majority have simply followed along. It's time now to stop being followers of those who seek to exploit and oppress. It's time to become followers of Jesus, who seeks to liberate, who seeks to heal, who seeks to make new, who seeks to make love the currency of human interaction and displace money. Jesus is angry. One of the great joys in my life that I can look back on my life with Dad and not be angry about the trees that he cut down that day, but simply to be sad that he did not see their value as trees. And I'll leave it